Hello everyone and welcome to another video with me, 320 Sim Pilot. Another exciting aircraft to look at today. This is the TFDI design MD-11 for Microsoft Flight Simulator. I am a real-world airline pilot. I currently fly the Boeing 787, so I'm hoping to give you some extra context on your home simulations and give you an idea of what I think of this aircraft in Microsoft Flight Simulator. This is a relatively new and highly detailed add-on, and it is of a very unique aeroplane, the McDonnell Douglas MD-11, which is of course a later revised variant of the DC-10. We're going to take it for a full flight and I'll give you my thoughts on it, and we'll also see how this aircraft is so unique in the way of operating it and the way it's set up. This was a relatively unsuccessful airliner. It only sold 200, or they only built 200 of them. This was due to it coming in at the late stage for three-engine aircraft. By this point, airlines wanted to have twin-engine and ETOPS, where we were allowed to fly long distances over the ocean with only two engines. This became a big thing just around the time the MD-11 was out, unfortunately. Its first aircraft was, or it first flew in 1989, but the last delivery of the passenger variant was 1998, so under 10 years later, and the last cargo variant in 2001. So it did not have a long production cycle, and like I say, not many were made, and not as many as they'd hoped to build. It has some interesting design changes over the DC-10 that it is an updated version on. It has the smaller tail, as you'll see. It has larger wings as well, so the tailplane at the back here is shrunk down. The wings are made larger. It has winglets, obviously, a big noticeable feature. There's also a bulge on the intake of the third engine, or the second engine, you could argue, in the middle of the tail there. The reason for this was it was designed to have better fuel efficiency. It has updated engines over the DC-10 and also better range. Unfortunately, when it came into service, it was discovered it did not really deliver on this, and despite some later programs by McDonnell Douglas to improve the efficiency of it, it didn't really capture the market because, as we said, by then you had options like the Boeing 777, which with ETOPS was allowed to fly long range over water and away from airports, and you had the Airbus A330-340 program as well. So this was an expensive aeroplane by that point with high running costs. Right, let's take a look around the outside and then we'll get going on our flight. Now, I've mentioned that this airplane is different and unique, and this is something that I've actually been putting off learning to fly. It has been around in other simulators, but I've been wary of taking on the challenge of learning this aircraft. Now, I would like to point out that this is actually a surprisingly simple aircraft or airliner to operate. If you're used to either the A320 or a Boeing, you'll find that this actually has a lot of features that make life quite simple for you. I'm very impressed, and I think that anyone who's used to flying any other commercial airliner in Microsoft Flight Simulator, any of the standard ones, so the fly-by-wire A320nx, the Phoenix A320, and obviously the PMDG 777, you'll find that this aircraft is no greater challenge than those. I'm sure it's difficult to master, but in terms of getting it up and running, it's surprisingly straightforward. TFDI also have some excellent quick start guides on their website that will help you out as well. So yeah, it's something I've been pleasantly surprised with how interesting the design on the flight deck is, and some features that this airplane has to make life simple that some others just don't have. So we'll see those in today's video. Let's take a look around the outside now, and you'll see that this is a really lovely textured airplane. They've really gone heavy on the wear and tear. It does look like a well-used machine, and that's what you'd expect. These are older airplanes now. You're not going to find a brand new one. So yeah, you've got streaks behind the pitot tubes, all the bits of grime and dirt behind every sort of vent and exhaust panel. The decals are absolutely lovely, as is the modelling. So if you see here, I love this detail. The nose gear doors are just hanging down a bit loose on the ground in this ground position. I'm not sure if that's a lack of hydraulic pressure. 767 does a similar thing. I believe they would be tucked up away properly when the gear is up, but there we go, we'll see that once we get going. And you've got bits of paint just wearing away gradually around the airframe rivets and spars, which is really nice. A good test is always to look right up at the nose gear, so there we go. You can see all the little screws, bolts in the right place, and the decals very legible, very clear. Got no complaints there. GPU is plugged in, although you can see it does seem to be missing that door that this would, I assume, be open and then the GPU plugged in there. As we move down the fuselage, the trend continues. Really nicely done, nice texturing. They've got a really good model here, so it does fit in well with Microsoft Flight Simulator. All the fan blades. And as we come up onto the top of the wing, you'll see different textures for the fuselage, and then different metals on the wing. The slats look really nice when they're extended, especially. We'll see that later on in the flight when we get going. But yeah, no complaints there. It's all very nice. It's a very nice looking model. Like I say, nice and wear. Perhaps the wings start to suffer a little bit in terms of lack of decals as we come further out, or of detail perhaps. as you just see, but still nice wear and tear, and from any normal usage you're not going to notice that. And here we have sort of some grime behind the engine. Again, a slight lack of detail on the wings, I might argue, although again I have not seen a real MD-11. I've not flown one, I've not seen one up close, so I can't be sure on that. So as you can see, the gear nicely detailed with the hydraulic lines. Yeah, all looks very reasonable, can't complain there. The magical third gear, of course, to share the weight around, so I quite like that, quite an unusual feature, not seen on many aircraft these days. The engineering of the landing gear seems to have improved to the point where they don't need it, even for aircraft of a similar weight to this, but there we go. As we move back down the fuselage then, we can see some of the big differences. So not only do we have these winglets as we talked about, but this tailplane is much smaller. So McDonnell Douglas had to they've done a partially computerized design for the stabilizer, so it's quite a clever bit of the design. Because it's so much smaller than it was in the DC-10, they've got a computerized system that helps it feel like the DC-10. So to keep it feeling like a conventional aeroplane. And there's that lovely third engine, or like I say, it's probably named engine number 2, but there we go. I think it's a nice feature to have a third engine on the tail, and I can tell you that it would be something that all pilots would like, more engines, but obviously not commercially viable as time went on. Again, nice texturing, nice wear on that engine exhaust cone, and as I said, the modelling is spot on. So the MD-11 has this, like some of the later DC-10 models, they have a bulge on the intake. Presumably they decided that this works better for the aerodynamic setup of the engine inlet. Quite a hard thing to do, have an engine up at the back there. It's surprisingly far back. Obviously, it's not mounted in the middle of the engine. It's sorry, in the middle of this fairing. It's right at the back here. The engine's just that little bit there, and it's also always hard to picture how you can have all that thrust pushing forwards just connected to the fuselage by this thin little little pylon underneath. But let's not forget, although it looks a bit strange and it's unusual, the mounting points in there would be obviously just as strong, if not stronger, than the ones that you have on the wing, because all engines are mounted ultimately with just little fairings and pylons. It's a surprising piece of design and engineering that this works at all, to have engines strapped onto an airplane with these thin bits, but that's how they do it. So there we go. Hopefully that gives you an idea. I assume this is the outflow valve, so for the pressurization system. You can see here the airplane is depowered at the moment, so there we go. And we'll just pop in this window, and we're in the cabin. There is a fully modelled cabin, if that's the sort of thing you like. This is the passenger variant, but there's of course also the cargo variant, the freighter variant. It's often known as a freighter these days, the MD-11, but that's only because about a quarter of them were built as freighters, which is an unusually high amount. However, it's not. It's also going to be the case that the freighters stayed in service longer than the passenger variants, because that's very common in aviation. Freighter companies can make more profit out of older passenger aircraft, and the airlines will move on to more modern ones, because the airlines will have to refit airplanes, they'll have to refit the cabins and so on to update for the products that people expect and refresh them, whereas cargo operators don't have to do that. So that'll be one of the reasons anyway. Right, let's jump into the flight deck and get going with this fantastic machine. Now, I've flown this only once just to check that I could at least turn it on, and I'm going to ruin our day by making it live weather, and you'll see what life in the UK is actually like. So there we go. This is July for you in the UK. It's a breezy, wet and windy day, but it's quite good for flying. It'll be quite interesting for the graphics, and we'll see Flight Simulator really stretch its legs. First of all, I'm going to go over to the EFB and I'm going to import my flight plan. You can load in a flight plan into here, and there you go. It gives you the flight time, the cruising altitude, cost and X, and so on, and it gives you the block fuel that you require and all this sort of stuff. So we're going to use this, actually. I'm going to use this exactly as it is, and then I'm going to show you how that compares with what the airplane actually does. You can have your Hoppy code for your ACARs as well. So you just have to type in your SimBrief username. Same for the charts. So basically features that we would expect. So then I can type in EGLL. Slightly simpler charts in the sense that it only will let you, you can click on one and there it is, but it doesn't actually stay for long. So I'm going to depart by umlaut and then come in by LWAS. So I'll just put the umlaut departure chart up over here. There's the umlaut charts, and we're taking off from runway 27 right, which is just over there, not far to go. Oh, don't want to fiddle with that too much. Right, so the airplane is cold and dark. Sadly, at this stage, there is no checklist. So the automatic checklist or the inbuilt checklist system is not running. Disappointing for me, but there we go. I'm a big fan of that system. However, like I say, there is a very good quick start guide on the TFDI website. So first of all, we need to actually set the weight as well. So done dispatch. So let's set the payload and fuel. So the airplane is set up. Oh, there we go. We can view departure airport charts. So anyway, so set the fuel and payload, and we'll check that in just a moment. Now let's get the airplane powered on. This is pretty straightforward to do, and it's not going to surprise you. We're going to first of all turn on the battery, and then we're going to turn on the external power, which as you can see is available. So let me turn on the battery, which is over here. So open the guards, click, close the guards, and then turn on the external power. And it does come to life. All the screens start flickering on. Some really nice sounds of fans and so on. I'm hoping the audio is just right, but we'll see. Maybe I'll set it there for you. So there we go. The airplane is powering on. It's not on battery power now. It's using the battery, but it also has the ground power, so fully powered up, ready to get us loading up. So you'll see things like the alignment and so on needs to begin. Okay, now we've done that, we are going to arm the emergency power and then align the IRSs. So we go up onto the overhead panel, onto the electrical panel. Now this overhead panel is formatted very similar to the Airbus, and a lot of this airplane is very Airbusy, and we'll see that, especially the FMS or CDU. So anyway, emergency power, I'm going to arm, which makes sense, and then we're going to align our IRSs. So we just put them into nav, generate some warnings as it wakes up. So they are now all starting to align. Good. You'll see, and this is what I really like, the systems now, we have an artificial horizon because we've turned the IRSs on. You'll see that all the little fail icons, all these unique symbology has all been done really, really well by TFDI. This is a very unusual airplane. It's got so many systems that don't look like anything else. It does share a flight deck with the 717, something we don't see very often in flight simulators. We haven't yet seen in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Well, maybe we have, but I have not used one in Flight Simulator, but there we go. But yeah, it's a unique sort of flight deck, and this is a very interesting one for them to have designed. Right, so moving on. We are now going to arm the emergency lights and put the external lights on the overhead, so that's pretty straightforward. So I'm going to arm the emergency lights, and we'll put the nav lights on the outside. Again, all these buttons are just a slight, I've never seen push buttons for the outside lights. So turn nav lights on there, and if we look outside, there we go, the rain's paused for a second. You'll see our nav lights have indeed turned on, so that's good news. Okay, great. So far we've turned on the electrical power, aligned the IRSs, put the nav lights on the outside, and armed the emergency lights inside, as well as putting the electrical emergency power to arm. Those cargo fire warning lights, they do automatically test when you align the IRSs, so that's normal. And this is what I'm going to mean about this airplane being very different but very automated. It does lots of random little things for you when it knows you want to do them. It's quite clever. It's like it's thinking ahead for you. It's thinking, you're going flying, let's test the cargo fire. Why would I need you to press the button? I know you're going flying, I'm going to test it. And it does when you align the IRSs. And I think that's just, there's a few more examples of that. We can also go down to our standby instrument. I have the analog ones, and I'm going to just pull this to gauge the standby artificial horizon. Love that animation, nice and smooth, very good. Oh, it does restart though. The real one wouldn't restart when you repressed it. It would also, once it's aligned. It would just sit there. But there we go. Right, that's done, and set the QNH 1003 on our standby altimeter. Good stuff. Now let's just go back over to our EFB, and I'm just going to set the payload and fuel just in case it didn't work earlier. And we should have a fuel figure of 12.8. 12.8. Super, that's done. So yeah, pretty light today. Estimated takeoff weight of 163 tons, landing weight of 159 tons. So we're landing with not much fuel. Sorry, we're taking off with not much fuel. We're landing with about the normal amount. But there we go, because of course this is a long haul machine, even if it could quite regularly be used for domestic flights, because it's a high density cabin relatively for aircraft of the time. Also, by having this fancy glass flight deck, it removed the need for a flight engineer. So on the DC-10 you'd have had a third pilot, the flight engineer, required to run the systems, but this is a much more modern flight deck, as you can see, so they really got it going. As you look around, by the way, you'll see again, I think the flight deck is actually some of the best texturing around. It's got fantastic wear on the yoke, on the floor panels. This sort of anti-rust chromey green that you get is spot on. Every little detail has just little bits of paint chipped off around the corners, and this is again what I would expect an airplane of this age to look like. So yeah, and they haven't gone too far. It's not excessive. It's just a really nice balance. So I'm very happy with the flight deck visuals. I think they've done a great job. While we're here, let's get some lights on. They've got some really strange light switches, so we'll just spin them all around so you can see what's going on. That's those, and then there's another one. We can do the this does the auto flight control system. There we go. Right, so, and look at that. Look at the way the light reflects in the FMS. That's fantastic. Really nice. A little bit of dust and fingerprints and grease, just as you'd expect on the real aircraft. Before we set up the FMS or the McDo or the CDU, whatever you'd like to call it in this airplane, it is very similar to the Airbus one, but we'll see that in just a moment. Let's look at some other unique features of the flight deck of the MD-11. As we saw, it's very electronic. It's unusual to have this many screens. So we have 3 screens for each pilot effectively. You've got your engine display traditionally set on the left, and then you have your systems display on the right, which at the moment is showing secondary engine parameters. You see where the stabilizer is set and so on. So it's not quite in the traditional places. We do, like the Airbus, have a screen here where we can press that and it will bring up what we're looking for. So there's the fuel system. A great fun seeing 3 engines. I really like that. And it does have status. So again, very Airbus related buttons and controls. The config as well, where you can see the flap position. Something I found really hard is judging where the flaps are, but look, you can see where the controls have moved to, so they're drooped down in the down position, tire pressure, brake temperature, things like that. So yeah, very interesting. So I'm going to turn off the electrical, and put it back to engine, which is what it was sitting at before. Next, on the overhead panel, we can see that this is actually, again, formatted in a weird way, very similarly to the Airbus. Now remember that this did come out at a time not far off from the Airbus's time, the 1980s, so it is not surprising. But if you look around, you can see things like the way they formatted the fuel panel, and it says fuel, and it's along there, air along there, electric along there, and hydraulics along there. So this is very similar to the Airbus sort of layout of doing things, and it uses a similar sort of switch, slightly different from the Boeing ones. So again, interesting, because of course McDonnell Douglas later became Boeing, so it does surprise me how it is so similar. Our fuel panel is quite interesting because it does show our fuel quantities up here on the overhead panel, and it has auxiliary tail tanks that it can trim into as well and transfer around. Good. Pressurization is pretty straightforward. Over here, yaw dampers and autopilot again. And what's nice about this overhead panel is there's very little to do. If you find the airplane set up like it was, even cold and dark, things like the generators are armed, they're ready to go. Like the Airbus, you just leave them on. You don't have to turn them on and off, swap things over. It makes the 737 look incredibly complicated. So despite the overwhelming amount of buttons, there's actually surprisingly little you need to do. You'll see it says nav off on the IRSs. That's because we haven't aligned them. So let's jump into the seat and get going on our FMS. Right into the FMS. So I'm going to go FMC1, and you can see model MD-11 and the engine CF6. So this has the CFM engines. So there we go. And simply, we're going to take it straight through. Don't do anything there. So go back to page 1 of 2 and just go flight plan init. It's very strange. It's got a really weird combination between Boeing and Airbus, but it's mostly Airbus. So here you go. Now you'll see what I mean. So we're going to start in Heathrow, EGLL, and we're going to route to Manchester, Echo Golf Charlie Charlie, and just plonk it in up there. We'll take an alternate of East Midlands, put that over there. Will be the MXZ222, which is our standard test flight number, and we'll cruise at flight level 220. But actually, what you can do is you can type in the step cruise levels you want to cruise at. So you can put in 220, and then you could type in 350 after that, something like that. I would do 220, but I'm actually going to put 320 in just to give it a bit more of a realistic climb profile, just to show you the performance. So there we go. Cost index can go down in there. So you can type that in, but what you can also do is, of course, just send the flight plan to the FMC over here. So I can see my cost index is planned at, it did say cost index of 156. So if I type in 156 into there, temperature and wind, optimum flight level. So I don't know if that's written up here actually. It's not going to matter for a flight this short, but you could put in from your Simbury flight plan, which I do actually have here. So let me just type it in. So our average wind is 293 at 20. So I could just put in 293 at 20 for the wind calculations. Oh, out of range. No, it wants temperature and wind. So temperature of -34 and a average wind component for this flight of a pretty good -15. So headwind of 15 knots. Let's see if it takes that. There we go. -34 degrees, headwind of -15. And there we go. We can also initialize our IRS, and that will start to get all our modes coming together. Good. If I go to the next page then on the flight plan init, we can see our taxi fuel, the trip time, and so on, but we haven't put our route in yet, so I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to treat this like an Airbus one now. So we've done our data, done our init A, now for the flight plan. So we're taking off from Heathrow. We're going to depart, so SID. So to do this, just like the Airbus, you press next to the airport, then you press SID, standard instrument departure, taking off from runway 27 right, and we've already said we want the umlaut departure, so I'm going to scroll down, umlaut 1 Foxtrot, And there we go, and then little insert prompt, so we hit insert. Now, of course, we could load in the route by just clicking send flight plan to FMC. It's another way to do it, and that would load in a lot of this stuff into here. But I'm just showing you how you can do it manually, just like on the Airbus. So that takes us through to umlaut. After umlaut, we're going to go Tango 418 well in, Tango 420 Elvos. So we're going to go umlaut, airway, just like the Airbus. I mean, it is the exact same system, it seems to be anyway. Tango 418 to well in, Tango 418 to well in. Really nice, really responsive. Again, they've done a great job on this screen. And after well in, Tango 420 to Elvos. Tango 420 to Elvos. Done. And then that's the start of our arrival, so I'll insert that, because then we do the Elvos 1 mic. And this is an Airbus, so I can actually type it in straight away. So I scroll through, select Manchester, star. I'm expecting the westerly winds up there as well, so ILS 23 right, the Elvos 1 mic, and then insert. Good. Now, we have our navigation display. The adjustments are up here, so similar position to normal. You can increase the range with that button and decrease it with that. Unusual not to have a little scroll wheel. And then you can simply press plan, and as I scroll through the legs page, it will take us all the way through. And there we go, I can see it sequences up and takes us into the ILS 23 right. Looking good. So let's put that back to map by pressing map. So that is our flight plan all the way through. So now, diff secondary flight plan. I'm just going to copy the active. RadNav, or NavRad in this case, can be auto-tuned. I'm just going to leave it alone, so it's got London. And then we go back to our init, next page, and this is our init B effectively. So let's get these weights in. The zero fuel weights, and I can see this over here. I have a zero fuel at 151.6. 151.6. In it goes. And fuel, 12.8, that's what we've got, that's what we wanted. We're not on the APU yet, so we're not losing any. 12.8. Finally then we need to get the CG. Now you can go to payload and it actually shows you what your load is and what you've got. So there's our zero fuel at 151.5, which is 151.6, so I put it in, so that's fine. The only thing is I'm finding it hard to find the trim of the airplane. So what I think we can do is just plonk those in there. I think these are correct. Okay, so pretty standard then. That's our weight page setup, and if I go to the fuel init page, you could fiddle around with that, but we've already done our fuel, so we're not going to touch that. I'm not an MD-11 pilot, so there's loads of details in here that I don't actually know. But there's so that's our init B, so diff script, data, init A, flight plan, secondary flight plan, RadNav, init B, and finally performance is on our takeoff page. So EGL out to 27 right is where we're starting. So now we're going to go over to our EFB, and we're going to go to the perf tab, and I'm going to put the runway in. We're taking off from 27 right. 27 right, gather weather. There we go, QNH is 1004. Let's just make sure we got that set. So I'm going to set the QNH by changing it to hectopascals, 103, and then I'm going to set 1004. Using this little dial up here. Good. It does not coincide with the other side, sadly. There it is, 1004. Okay. Next, takeoff weight, I can just get that from the airplane by clicking that. Thrust setting, we'll use a flex. We won't have anti-ice, it's nice and warm. Ultimate flap, and packs will be on. That makes it easier for us, the air conditioning pack's on. You can specify the flaps, but I'm going to let the airplane choose its own, because it's quite an interesting feature. Next, you hit calculate. There's our speeds, 135, 135, 156. Flex to 59, flaps 24.4, and we'll see why in just a moment. So let's get this right. Flex of 59, so that goes in the top left. Takeoff CG of 27.9, gross weight of 164 tons. Packs will be on. Slope and wind, so this is a bit of a weird one. You just put the headwind component in, so that's about 19 knots, and the slope is 0. I'm not sure if they would do this on the real aircraft, but I'm going to put a slope of 0 and a headwind of, let's just put in 15. There we go. Right, outside air temperature is 13 degrees. This is utterly ridiculous, but look how you type this in. You have to type in 13C or F to be clear of which unit you're using. So I'm going to put C. Next flaps we already saw is 24.4. That sounds like a strange number, but it's because we have this funny little system like we had on the DC-9, so the MD-80. We've seen a similar thing. It's quite bizarre, but there we go. So 24.4, stab of 5.1. and speeds 135, 135, 156. So 135, 135, 156. We're using quite a lot of flap for takeoff here. It's quite a lot. So there we go. Climb thrust comes in at 1500 feet, acceleration at 3000 feet, and engine acceleration at 1500 feet. So 3000 feet this is a typical noise abatement profile. It's a bit of an old-fashioned one actually, so it makes sense that it's here in this aeroplane as standard. But there we go. If you go to the options, and then you can change the units and so on to how you want to have it, the IRS align time, put your username. Also, you can set up some panel states, and you have your services here, such as the cargoes, disconnect GPU. So yeah, I won't do that just yet because we are still using it. Good. So that is now set up. We have our takeoff page set. Now we need to set up a few last things. So we've already set the QNH. What I'm going to do is in the speed window set 250 knots or VCL, which is the minimum clean speed. So that's the speed that the airplane will target after the takeoff phase. 250 is the standard speed below 10,000 feet. But if we look down here, our VCL is 217. So we can fly clean. That means bringing all the flaps in at 217 knots. So we don't need to set that. If that was above 250, we would set that up in the window instead. So the airplane would clean up. So you can clean up fully below 10,000 because you don't have to stay below 250 if you want to be clean. 787 does the same thing as well. Good. So that is done. We're going to put the runway heading into the MCP. So I'm just going to scroll this round. Again, taking off a westerly runway. I believe it's something like 269 degrees. There we go. And the stop altitude of the standard instrument departure. 6,000 feet, which if we go to our charts, and we go back to umlaut, there it is, 6,000 feet is the stop altitude on the departure. Good, so that's set up, so we've got the speed, the heading and the altitude we want, and there's not a lot else. Look how simplified this control panel is for the autopilot. It's fantastic. This is a genius piece of design. It utilizes the same push and pull system as the Airbus, and I absolutely love it. I think it's brilliant. Now, let's start up the APU. Now, this is a little bit of a strange one, but it's quite simple. Where do you think the APU button is? It's where it should be, on the electrical panel. That's what we mainly use it for. And you simply press APU power. It goes into flash, and it's now starting the APU, which you can see over here, starting up on this system screen. Perfect. That's good news. We'll leave it running. Once that says on and avail, then we know it's on, and we can get rid of the external power. What we can do in the meantime is set that flap setting. So I wanted 24.4 degrees of flap for takeoff. So you go to this little dialer flap, and we scroll it, and you'll see it's quite a lot. And this way we can know where we're setting the flap and get the 24.4 degrees exact. A lot of airlines apparently didn't use this, or they would standardize it, which makes a lot of sense, I think, in day-to-day operations. But there's 24.4. Good. Now the APU does take a bit of time to get going. Look, it's only at 50% N1. N2's at 100. Maybe it is running. Oh, yes it is, on and avail. Good. So we'll get rid of the external power. You can see that it's armed with the next bus ties, so it's doing it all itself, which is great. Don't have to worry too much. And on the air panel, I'm going to turn on the APU bleed. That will get the air conditioning packs running. I'm also going to select an ignition system for start. So let's use ignition system A for today's flight, which you can see gets rid of that amber warning. That's interesting. It turns off the packs automatically when I press that. Look at that. So the packs go off. Genius. Again, it knows that when I start the engines, I need to turn the packs off, so it just closes them for me. And then you turn off the ignition system, and the packs open. Absolutely brilliant. They've just thought of all of these things. So let's get the airplane properly ready to start. So I will put the ignition system A on. I'm going to have all the seatbelt signs, no smoking signs on, and I'm going to put the beacon on outside so that people around know that we're getting ready to go. So last things to do, and you'll see if we look outside that the flight controls are drooped. So the plane is not hydraulically pressurized, but we would have spoken to the ground crew as they connect the tug and asked to pressurize. They would say yes, and now we go and we turn on a specific pump. We turn on the hydraulics, aux pump 1. And that gives us some pressurization. I believe for the brakes, it does some of the flight controls, but not all of them. So you'll see that we have some controls working and some not, but it has enough for us to safely push back. So there we go. GPU power we can get rid of now, so we'll go to the services, disconnect GPU, remove the chocks. Parking brake should have been on all that time. There we go, and we're going to start the pushback. So here comes our tug. So commencing pushback, release the parking brake, and away we go. Beautiful, what a machine. Love the detail and the age on it. Now 3 engines to start. You do start them one at a time, I believe. So yeah, quite a traditional system that. So it does take a little bit of time, so we'll get those going fairly shortly, but let's just enjoy the view from the outside as this machine pushes back. Real heavy metal flying. MD-11 famous amongst its pilots as well for its bad characteristics on landing. It could be easy to get wrong and to have a bounce, and there's been a few unfortunately fatal accidents of this aircraft bouncing on landing, which is unusual for an airliner of this size to have that sort of a problem, and also to have, you know, with so few built, to have several instances of it on the same type is an unusual thing indeed. Glorious. I love the windows on the flight deck. I suspect the pilots had a great view because they're so big, really cool. So starting engines is pretty straightforward. You've got to have selected your ignition system, as we have. You've got to have turned your APU bleed on, as we have. And you can see the packs have actually restarted because I was faffing around for so long. But if I simply pull the start on engine number 1, you'll see that the packs automatically turn off on their own. So it does just like the Airbus, figure it out itself. We'll just stop the pushback there, don't want to go any further, and set the parking brake. And you'll see that the number 1 engine is spinning. Once we get to 15%, so we meet the blue line on the N2, I can introduce fuel. There we go, awesome. So quite a straightforward engine start, pretty standard for aircraft of this type, if a little unautomated. There it is. Some really nice sounds on it as well. Starter motor cuts out there, you can see the EGT rising nice and stable, and the start lever's gone, so we'll do the next engine number 2. Up in the tail, wait for the N2 to reach 15%. There it is, fuel on. Look at that engine tucked away in there. What a nice bonus to have, that little engine ready to go. But yeah, a fuel thirsty configuration, no doubt about that. And finally, number 3. And there we are, up and running. Pretty straightforward. So the next step is a pretty standard sort of after start flow for an aircraft like this. What we need to do is get rid of the APU, so we're going to turn off the APU bleed, and again, highly automated. By turning off the APU bleed, I believe the APU will shut down on its own, which it seems to have done already. So I'm not sure, I must have missed something there. But yeah, amazing, straightforward. Next we're going to set the, if you did have the APU on, you just turn off the APU bleed down there, and it would shut down the APU on its own. Very clever system. Next we're going to set the flaps, so that's bringing just the slats out in the first position, so flaps are at 0, slats travelling. But I then want to set them to my dialer flap, so press it again, and it will go to our dialer flap position. And we can see that if we go to the config page. There we go, 24, 24, 24. So that's all in the right position. We can also do a flight control check. I love the graphic they use for this. Left, right on the rudder. Big 2-part rudder above the third engine there. And same for the ailerons and the elevators. Love that. Again, great animations on the flight controls. Move nice and smoothly, nice and slowly, like the real thing. Awesome. All double-parted. A very redundant airplane. There was a famous DC-10 incident where it lost all hydraulic systems. A very nasty accident with a very tragic outcome. And this aircraft had fuses put into the hydraulic system to make it even more redundant. So even if the hydraulic systems leaked, it would have some pressure in them. It's very, yeah, very interesting. But there we go. Next, I'm going to arm the spoilers for takeoff just by clicking this handle. I'm going to set the auto brakes to RTO, or to the TO position. There we go, auto brakes. And I'm going to set the trim. So our trim for takeoff, we needed set to a stabilizer of, where was it written? 5.1. And I can see that if I go back to you can see it on the flight control config page, but also on the normal engine page, I can see the stabilizer there. So that one you do need to see. And we said 4.1. Did we say 4.1 or did we say 5.1? Already forgotten. 5.1. There we go. So run that to 5.1. It's very sensitive, very quick trim. Quite hard to get right. There we go. 5.1, and I think that's it. So now on the MCP, or FCP they call it, we're going to press two buttons. I'm going to press nav to tell it I want to arm the nav mode. So let's just see what it's ready autoflight system has for takeoff. There's our V2 of 156. In the pitch mode, it's in the takeoff mode, and it's got takeoff clamps. So we don't want this. We're going to arm nav. Also, something I should have done is pull the runway heading once when we set it. There we go. And then arm profile. Okay, good. Let's get taxiing. Done our flight control check, so I'm going to put the taxi light to taxi, and I'm going to release the parking brake. There it goes, and we start moving. Now, this is a challenging aeroplane to taxi, I will say that. We're very light at the moment because we don't have long-haul fuel on board. But yeah, you need to have the speed under control, especially if it's wet outside, or you'll have problems very quickly. Let me just bring the charts up here. Does it remember? We're on the... No, it doesn't remember. See, this is something I'd like it to remember where we are, but it doesn't. There we go. A bit more power needed. Okay, we're moving. So, nice and gentle on the turn, speed under control. It does take a little bit of power, especially if you're actually flying a long-haul flight with this, but it's easy to drag that nose gear. Just like the A320, the nose gear, you can see at full angle, only one wheel is contacting the ground. It tilts. That makes the 320, and I'm assuming the MD-11 in real life, very prone to sliding on their nose gear, because it means only one tyre at the front is trying to change the direction of all of this heavy metal. So that's something to be very conscious of. There we go. Right. Excellent. Once again, I cannot get over how much I like the visual model on this aircraft. Absolutely gorgeous. And the sounds are very nice too. Got that older sort of turbofan engine sounds. Similar to the A300, A310. Okay, right, approaching the runway, lining up then. Just make sure we don't get steered off. Good, right, so we'll have the landing lights on. They actually extend out the nose of the airplane, which is pretty cool. Not something you see very often. But again, similar to the Airbus extending landing lights, so they actually come out here. I imagine you could hear those extending on the real airplane quite loudly, being that close to the flight deck. We're then going to put the high intensity lights on. Those are on there. I'll have the logo lights on, even though it's not going to matter in the daylight like this. Good, clear on the approach, and make sure we get our TCAS on. Pretty standard TCAS panel down here. Put it to TA-RA. Good, no electronic checklist on this aircraft, but we do have to do a takeoff config check, which is actually really straightforward. You can see it down here on the engine display. So see that green box? If you've got everything in the right place for takeoff config, that will show a little green box. It does the same thing on landing. Again, very neat system that just solves it for you. Quite a clever solution. I like it. Now I'll show you how that changes if it's not ready. The only downside of it is I would say it's not very obvious if it isn't there, but if your checklist would obviously tell you to check it. So if I bring the airplane to a stop on the runway and then I set the parking brake, not that one, that's the gear lever, there's the parking brake. You can see there, it says brake, so the brakes are the issue. If I release the parking brake, it goes green. Auto brakes are in takeoff, no smoking, seatbelts are all in a good place. So once that brake's released, it's in a good place. We've got our V2, we've got the pitch mode for takeoff, and then we've got takeoff clamp. So the takeoff profile, very straightforward, highly automated. What we need to do is we're going to arm the autoflight. So we're going to press autoflight up here, and that arms it. So it's now armed. You should only need to press it once. Then we're going to set the throttles. You just slowly move them forwards. Once they reach about 70%, it will get taken over. This is similar to the BAE 146 system. It will actually take over and then set them to the right takeoff thrust. Rotates, which will be called out. We'll see it on the speed tape, 135. Quite a low speed, but we have a lot of flap out. We'll rotate the airplane 18 to 21 degrees of pitch, so very high pitch attitude. We have a lot of power. This is actually a thirsty airplane, but it is a powerful one. So it can get up going very quickly up into the air, and will fly at around the speed for flaps retraction, VFR. And that's what the autoflight system will do. And then at 3,000 feet it will accelerate to 250 knots, or the clean speed, whatever we set, and then we can bring the flaps up above FR, which is the speed for flap retraction. You'll see that on the left, and then we'll see the flaps retraction speed. So 10 knots above those we can bring in the flaps and put in the autopilot. Okay, it sounds pretty straightforward, doesn't it? So let's give it a go. So parking brake released, config is good. Keeping the airplane straight with the rudders, spooling the engines up now, up. I'll I'll just give them a second to stabilise, and now we'll drive them forwards. And there you go. Now the auto throttle system's taken over automatically. It's like, yeah, I know you want to go flying. I'm going to set the thrust you asked for. Using the rudder, they've done a fantastic job on the ground handling. The rudder feels really nice. You can see here, that's full rudder left, full rudder right. Look at that, nicely damped. It does make taxiing challenging, but it's really well done on the takeoff roll. Already above V1 because it is a breezy day here. And there's our rotate speed. So we'll rotate the nose up, nice and gently, nice heavy feeling to it. Positive rate of climb, gear up, fantastic clunk. And yeah, about 20 degrees of pitch needed. Way up into the sky, we've got loads of power. I'm not going to go too much through it, so I'm going to just hold it about here. We are very light, we don't have much fuel on, that's why our takeoff performance is absolutely obscene. Look at that. Doesn't get much better than that, that's the magic of 3 engines. Okay, I'm going to gradually pitch towards that flight director now, because it seems to have settled down, because we want to climb out at the FR speed. So you can see there, so it's coming together now. Flight directors are giving us good guidance. Utterly ridiculous. Now 3,000 feet, it now transitions and it's going to accelerate to 250. You can see the 250 bug there. So I'll lower the nose. It's gone into nav 1 because we armed nav, and it's moved to climb thrust, profile to 32,000 feet, which is our cruising level. So lowering the nose now, bit of forward trim just to keep it there. We're above the FR speed and 10 knots above the FR speed, so flaps can come in, so they go to the slap position. I'm going to turn on the autopilot. In it goes, and you get AP1. And now we're 10 knots above the slats position, so if I show you that, we can bring the slats in. So slats are coming in now. Gorgeous, what a machine. So much power. Look at the animations, the way the different slats move in and out with each other. Really good. So, last 1,000 feet then, there's 6,000 feet, it's gone into outhold. It's accelerated through 250. And it's now reducing. It should stay at 250. You can see the pink dot for 250, and there we go. So it's going to hold 6,000, and if I go to my flight plan page, I can actually see what it's expecting to do. So next is 60 at umlaut, so it should try and maintain that. It gives us that classic McDonnell Douglas altitude warning with the speech. I really like that. By the way, this GE and SE, you've got your gear extension and your slats extension. These are the maximum limit speeds, so you can't extend the gear above that speed, which is why it's there. I also like how twitchy the yoke is. It seems to move very actively all the time. There you go. Making a right turn. Carrying on with the SID, I'll just increase the range, staying at 6,000. Now, there's every chance air traffic control would let you climb off of this. So if they said to you, climb now, flight level 150, you could put 150 in the window. Scroll, scroll, scroll. Struggling a bit with the turbulence there. 150, and you can see it's just it's carrying on its climb now because we're past Burlington. But if you wanted to, you could just pull it like you would on the Airbus, and it will go climb thrust, and then it will override the restriction and climb up to that next level. So it's very similar to the Airbus. If you want to force it to climb somewhere, just pull. Likewise, the heading bug is blanked out. Really good. No heading bug. We don't need it. But if I wanted to, I could bring it to life, and let's say air traffic control said turn right heading 010 degrees. I put 010 in the window, and then just like on the Airbus, I pull it. And I'm going to set the bank angle to auto as well, by the way. There we go. Good. And now you're in heading 010. I love that it writes it up there. I think that's really good. And then you've got climb thrust 15,000. It's going to go all the way to 15,000. It's very clear about what it's going to do next and if it's on a restriction. Something else that's good is that, like the Boeings, so they've got a good mix here, you can actually go back into profile mode even when you're not on the lateral profile, so you can let it fly around in magenta, manage mode as it were, even when you're not on the lateral one. So there we go. Air traffic now says route direct to Woburn. So just like the A320, direct Woburn, go to the top, press it again, it inserts. It does stay in heading mode, which is a Boeing thing, so now I need to tell it nav. I want you back in nav, follow that pink line, please. Right, get the landing lights off. We're above 10,000 feet, all of that can go off. I'm going to turn on the seatbelt signs, let the passengers know that you can't smoke, but you can have the seatbelts. They've got an auto position, also like the Airbus, but there we go. And we're well underway. Look at that, climbing at a very fast speed. We have loads of performance, but you can see it's locked in at 32,000, reversing to VS. So let's just, why is it doing this? Let's have a look. Out to 10.6. Not sure why it's descending. Wanted to go up to 32. Profile. No, we're going to force it to climb. Climb thrust to 32,000, please. Do not descend. Strange. I don't know why it didn't do that earlier on me, but there we go. Plenty more to learn. It is a complex machine, no doubt about it. Up we go. Something to remember, anti-ice. It's warning us about the stabilizer travelling because it's having to constantly counteract the big changes in thrust and pitch from the engines. So sometimes it does quite large trim changes, so you get that warning, which is just warning you it's moving in case you want to cut it out yourself or override it. Right, now we're underway. Let's just run through the after takeoff so we can disarm the spoilers. I can turn the auto brakes off. Landing lights have already gone, and then I'm going to reset the dialer flap to 15 degrees. That way we have a 15-degree flap setting ready for the approach, is my understanding. So wind it back to 15. A long way to go from where we were. Good. So now when we go, we'll go flaps, which slats will come out, and then we'll go flap 15, flap 28, flap 35, which will be our landing flap most likely. Something to remember as well on this aircraft, you must remember to come to the overhead panel and put the engine anti-ice on if you need it, and the wing and tail lights on if you need it as well, and the windshield heat I should have put on as well, so let's have that on. I believe you would turn that on unless it's automatic, because it does warn you it's on down here, so I'm not sure about the windshield heat. It's an interesting one. You can also set it to high, which is pretty cool. Clearly the pitos seem to be automatically done, but there we go. It's also defog mode. So they're automatically on defog, so maybe you would only turn them on if you needed them, I'm not sure. Same for the anti-ice, you see, you can turn it on. But if you do that, it will actually tell you there's no ice detected, please turn it off. So not quite as automated as modern long-haul aircraft, but there we go. So I'll leave the windshield ice on just because traditionally I would. Right, and away we go. So we're off our profile. I'm still not sure what happened there, so let's try profile again. Profile to it wants to go to 20,000. It keeps sort of leveling off when I do that. I don't understand why. From TP 10.6 to Woburn 320. Woburn should be the next waypoint. No, it doesn't seem to be. Doesn't seem to have woken up that I want Woburn next. So let's just go Woburn. Let's force it to climb. Yeah, that's a confusing one to me. So something I need to learn there. Because I can see the vertical profiles well above us up there. If we go to the perf page, we can see we are... it's already in the descent phase, that's why. It's already trying to descend. I'm not entirely sure why. So I've got it to level off at 25,000 feet. We're in nav mode, so we're quite happy with the nav mode. You can see the descent's slightly beneath us. It wants us to go down already. Now, I've flown this earlier. I did this route earlier. I don't know why this has happened to me on this video, sadly. But it did give me a top of descent arrow, and you should be able to just fly it along in profile mode, just like VNAV path on the Boeing, so it would just be quite happy there. If I go to my flight plan page, I can see a TP and then a Cooper, which is coming up, and then it wants me to be at 242 as a Cooper to make the LVOS restriction at flight level 200. So it is successfully reading the charts. If I go to my Manchester charts, we can see the star, and we have the LVOS arrival, and there we go, flight level 200 at LVOS is there, and it's got flight level 200 at LVOS in here. And then we have a descent profile there. And for just some reason it got latched into the descent mode early on in the flight, so I've obviously pressed something wrong there. But it is in thrust, it's managing the speed, it's managing the navigation, and we're holding flight level 250. If you want to change the level, you can wind in a new level, and let's say a traffic control sends you down, you can just pull it and it will do an idle down to 240, or of course you can just engage a vertical speed. Something I quite like is that if you just by touching the vertical speed window, it will go into a vertical speed, so it knows you want to fly it, it just does it for you. It's very good. I think it's better than having a separate vertical speed button, but there we go. And then it goes to 240. Speed is just managed, heading is not needed, the heading bug. So yeah, very much like an A320 at this point. I like it a lot. I'll just let that level off at 240. Some things we need to set up for arrival. We can put the descent QNH on if we want, onto the standby altimeter. I think it's a little bit lower than it is here. We can also go to the performance page. The takeoff approach page. And set our landing flap. So I'm going 35 to land. You could do a flap 50 landing, so that gives a VAP of 143. So I'll leave that alone, that's good. I can see on the NavRad page that it hasn't yet tuned the ILS, we're a bit too far away. And of course you would check your flight plan, have I actually got the arrival in. So the star into Manchester, there it is, LVOS ILS 23 right, so that all works correctly. There's the altitude warning as the airplane levels itself at 240. All looking good. Now you can see the vertical profiles disappearing beneath us. So what I actually want to do is wind in my next clear altitude. Let's say air traffic control says descend flight level 120, and then I press profile, and now we're back in that VNAV path sort of mode like from a Boeing, or the managed mode of an Airbus. So you've got thrust, nav, it all goes magenta because the airplane's controlling everything now. and it's in the profile. It's flying the profile. It shows me that the next descent restriction is flight level 200, but it's going to fly the profile all the way down to 12,000. So what it's saying is I will not go below 12,000 because that's what you've asked for in this window over here, but I will level off at 200 because that is part of the flight plan profile that we've both agreed and I've shown you in the box. And that's because LVOS has the restriction. By the way, on this nav display, it shows me the navigator tune to Honolulu and Daventry. I believe if I go to NavRed, we'll see those, Honolulu, Daventry. But you can actually choose what gets displayed over here. So I can press airports, I can press traffic, which is two things you definitely want. You can bring up data, which shows you the restrictions, which is really useful, and then all the waypoints you do not want to bother with that. I wouldn't even necessarily keep all the airports up, but there we go. Very fast descent speed on this one. That's why I have to descend so early. We also have different modes, so you can have the VOR course mode, you can have a TCAS sort of screen, but mainly you're going to be in the map mode or maybe the plan and increase the range like that. We can also display the tune needles with these little buttons up here, and it's quite flexible. You can tune either VOR, either ADF. Again, not going to bother with that. Good, so 200 at LVOS, it's about to meet that restriction now, and you'll see that that 200 will next change to the next restricted level, so the next level the flight plan wants us to be at. Like I say, we should have been able to leave it in profile all the way up to cruise, and then at near the top of the descent just wind in the lower altitude and it would have worked. So I'm quite surprised by that. There we go, profile now to 8,000, so that's the next restriction. So you can see what it's actually going to do is try and go down to 8,000, but it's going to have to stop at 12 because I've given it 12 in the window. Right, at least that's my understanding of it. Again, I don't fly this airplane in the real world, so I am hoping that's right. Let's bring up the ILS for 2-3 right and just set the minima. 449. So that can be done with our minimum knob. Put it to Barrow, not radio, and set 449. These are always a nightmare in simulators. Oh dear. At least it doesn't suddenly jump on you like the Boeing one does on the 777. 449 minimums. Good. So we've got our landing flap, we've got our minimums, we've tuned the ILS and the approach, we know our chart, so we're going to fly in, fly this ILS down. 3,500 feet is the altitude at which we'll intercept the ILS. So let's just quickly brief it. The airplane has a managed speed mode, so it will reduce the speed, and I can see here at Dane it'll be 204 knots, then at CF23 right it'll be 170 knots. These are pretty good speed restrictions. If I go to the takeoff profile page, I'll see the minimum clean speed is 188 knots, and then the slats have to be out by 153, flaps have to be at 28 by 141 knots. So I'll just extend the flaps on a normal sort of profile. Remember, we'll see the speed limits on the flaps on our speed tape. We'll then join the ILS by pressing, quite simply, approach land. It's very easy, it's very good. That will arm the localizer and the glide slope. Why have separate buttons? I want to use the approach mode, so I'll let it do it. And we'll let the airplane fly around, fly the descent, lower the gear, get to the landing flap, arm the ground spoilers just like every other airliner out there, and then we'll disconnect the autopilot and land. It's an unusual airplane for landing. As I said, it is known to be challenging, so I will have to be very careful not to float, not to bounce. It actually starts slowly reducing the throttles quite high, about 50 feet, and then you start the flare about 40 feet, so relatively early. 777, 787, you actually flare below just after about 30 feet, A320 around 30 feet as well. So a little bit earlier, but it is a heavier aeroplane. Let's also set an auto brake setting, so I'll just go auto brakes. I'm going to go medium for this landing, just to get us stopped on the runway. So as expected, it has leveled off at 12,000 feet. I can see no glide slope warning, and I can see the descent profile, this little magenta diamond, has gone below us. So I'm going to now wind in the new altitude, and I'm actually going to put it all the way down to the platform altitude of 3,500 feet. And then I'm going to let the airplane carry on, and it automatically carries on in profile because we were in profile mode. You can see it has the 8,000 at Dane restriction, which it will obey next. And away we go. I can see the target speed is reduced to 245 as we come down below 10,000, so that speed is gradually reducing. We can see that with the green trend vector there. I go to the overhead panel now, just as we're approaching 10,000 feet. Let's turn on the... Oh, we don't want the emergency lights on, but we'll turn on the landing lights. And I'll put the seatbelt signs back on. Short flight, eh? Very short flight. See the weather radar is off. Let's just turn... Where do I turn the weather radar on? That's a good question for me. Probably down here. There it is. Let's have weather and turbulence. Let's see what that can paint for us. There you go. Weather and turbulence, tilt 0. Range 40. Good. Now we're getting an add drag message. The airplane is complaining it can't get slow enough and it's not managing the profile. But I'm going to give it a bit of faith, a bit of time to think about that, because I think it can do it. See the wind vector up here, a very unusual format. It shows us a direct headwind and crosswind component. It's not showing us the actual wind arrow relative to the aircraft. But you can change a lot of this stuff over here. So let me have a look. In systems, by the way, you can do some really cool things. You can have tape displays. Watch this. I love this. So look at that. Really old school, very different way of showing engine parameters. I like it, but very rare, so I'll get rid of those because they'll confuse me pretty quickly. Single Q flight vector, awful, I wouldn't use that. Wind vector type, you see it's track. I think if we tried vector, we get the more traditional arrow. So this shows us just the general direction of it, and we can work out the component in our head. So that's saying the wind right here is 291 degrees, 23 knots, which means relative to us, it's coming slightly from the left, from 290 degrees. So that's the actual wind, and then the arrow is the relative direction. But if I show the track, we get this really cool, you've got 19 knot headwind, 8 knots across. Really interesting. I like it. There we go, back at 250 knots. The add drag message is gone. This airplane is actually a bit better at meeting its descent restrictions than the 787 usually misses them, whereas this airplane has the ability to do it. So here we go, it's now got 1,000 feet to go, it's on profile, down, doesn't want to go below 8,000 before Dane, so it's making that. Now, because we're so light now, we don't have to put the slats out or anything too early, so that's pretty good news. By the way, something we could have done as well is the landing performance. So if I put the runway 23 right, let's make it wet, there have been showers, in fact we can just get the weather information for the rest of it. Landing weights, that's a good question. We're going to go automatic medium, reverses. Look at that, you can choose wing tail or none. That's cool. We'll do flat 35 landing. It just wants our landing weight. So if I go and find, is our weight shown anyway? 160 tons, there we go. So just type in 160, calculates, there we go. 747 meters. At these light weights with the headwind, this airplane stops so quickly, so quickly. I've been quite amazed actually at the landing I've tried so far. Good, now you can see the speed target's reduced to 207, and if we go in here, our minimum clean is 188, so that's still absolutely fine. It's saying add drag. We are now a little bit sporty because we're coming through 6,000 feet, 250 knots, shortly to fly our turn. Now you can see the localizer and glide slope have started to appear. We have the diamonds, and we can look in our NavRad page and see that it has tuned 1095, which if I look on my charts page, is indeed 1095, the ILS that we want to tune. Good. Remember as well, run those anti-ices as you come through the clouds if you need to on the engines. Now, not uncommon for air traffic control to vector you, so if you had that happen, again, just pull the heading bug and it will go into heading, and you can see that's dropped into vertical speed mode, and maybe they'll put you on heading 010 degrees. So there we go. So by pulling it, it just goes into the heading ahead of you, and then you need to pull it again once you've selected the heading you want. Interesting, interesting. FF23 right was the next waypoint. Let me just check. From Dane to Centrefix, yeah, and then FF, so that's good. So we're actually, this is going to cut us in a bit too tight, so I'm going to take us a bit wider. It's in vertical speed, it's doing 600 feet per minute. Let's just go down a little bit quicker than that. 1,000 feet per minute, good. And let's start getting some flap out. So we'll take these slats. So one's position, out they come. Perfect, perfect. Really nice animation on those. Good, 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 good. There is an approach mode as well to show the ILS, quarter spar and so on once we're around the corner. There you go, airplane desperately retrimming as we change the configuration. And now we'll bring the heading back round to inset that ILS. Again, it's not following it. I need to demand it. There we go. Heading 260. There's our slats retraction speed, so that's our minimum clean speed, but we have got the slats out, so we're fine to go below it. Now if air traffic control asks you for a speed, you can just pull the speed, like on the 320. Let's say they said 180 knots, 180, and then pull, and there comes the engines, keeping us at the 180 knot speed bug. Now it's sequenced correctly to the runway 23 right over there. And remember, you could have just done this in nav mode. We can see a glide slope coming in. And we've leveled at 3,500 feet. How far out are we? Oh, it's interesting. There you go. There's just the slats written there. That's interesting. Showing you what you could go to. Let's now arm the approach. And it looks like we're going to have to descend a bit more to find that RS. So let's just drop it to 2,500 feet. And we'll do the VS down 1,500. Getting a bit above the glide slope, so let's lower the landing gear. Landing gear down. Love that clunk. Not sure why it's not descending. There we go. Let's put 2,000. I'd like it descending VS really. Oh, we're getting very high now. Let's try 2,000 feet per minute. Get the speed brakes out. And we'll manage the speeds. FMS speed, there we go, that's managing the speed. Now coming to idle. So we're on the localizer, we are above that glide slope. So we'll do a glide slope from above effectively. So let's get a bit more of the flap out. We'll go to flap 15, get some drag out. Land is armed, you'll see, so it should go into glide slope any moment. There's glide slope, so let's put the speed brake away, because now the airplane is on profile, and I can arm it for landing. And we'll go to flap 28, so we're on the localizer, glide slope, flaps at 28, which they need to be. Remember, by the time we get back this slow, really, we are a bit slow, I think, there. Flap 28 by 141, okay. And we'll go to flap 35, you can see the speed limit's up there, so I quite like that it shows you the speed limit for the next flap setting, very cool. And there you go, it tells us flaps 35, shown on the PFD, that's very interesting. VAP of 133, we're at flaps 35, let me just make sure we are indeed. We've got the auto brake armed, we've got the speed brake armed, and there's our green box showing us that the airplane is configured for landing. Just like it was on takeoff. So a bit of a messy approach there, but I think we've made it. We'll just put the go around altitude into the window in case we need it, which is on this approach of 3,500 feet. There we go. And we're in thrust, lock, glide slope, land mode is armed. Excellent. Now you'll notice it does sit quite nose high. This is a thing with MD-11s. You see them in the real world do this. They just seem to come in surprisingly slow. It gives them these incredible short landing distance. But yeah, look at that. Nose way up into the sky. Fantastic sounds. Such a chunky airplane. Awesome. So all we're going to do is we're going to disconnect the autopilot. I will also, let's just bring the heading around so it's somewhat useful. I'll simply disconnect the autopilot as we get a bit lower, and then the auto throttle system will bring the thrust levers back for landing. So I'm just going to flare around about 40 feet and let the airplane touch down, get the reverses out to idle, let the auto brake kick in. It's a very sensitive airplane. It does respond, even with the nose way up there, but it is so strange flying with a high nose attitude like this. That's probably more of a view you'd expect. Look at these big windows on the side though. Fantastic view out. That must be great in the cruise. Views you'd get. I don't know if you can click the sunshades. Won't mess around too much now on final. Good. So, autopilot off. Love the sounds. And there you go. It says AP off on the screen in front of us. Nice and gentle now. Follow those flight directives. Don't need to retrim it. Don't need to do too much. The airplane sets us up on a nice stable approach. Easy. That's easy to get a sudden amount of sync there because the auto throttle responds to you. So there we go. Try not to over control. Driving it into that touchdown zone now. Minimum.
Glide slow. Glide slow.
There's the idle. Bit of left rudder. There's touchdown. holding the nose, keep the wings level, left rudder in, and let that nose settle. There we go, get the reversers out. Not very neat. It's a challenging plane to touch down, I'll tell you that. If the systems don't put you off, and they shouldn't, they are very straightforward. The landings are the thing to master on this aeroplane. Just no energy at all. So as I tried to put the rudder in there, it just wasn't interested. Right, we'll go forward idle on the reversers and bring it to a stop.
Approaching minimum 200. Minimum 100. 50, 40, 30, 20, 10.
So there we go, that's our MD-11 back on the ground. What an amazing machine. TFDI have done a fantastic job, I think, of bringing this aircraft to life in Microsoft Flight Simulator. It looks the part, it fits in with a modern add-on. In 2024, you know, we expect very good add-ons to Microsoft Flight Simulator, and this certainly lives up to that. The texturing, the visual model are all gorgeous, the scaling of the model is fantastic, and the systems are as deep as I would have hoped for operating this airplane on the line, you know, for flying these flights as we have just done. It's a remarkable airplane, and as I say, it has a lot of automated systems. It's not actually too difficult to get the airplane into the sky if you're used to flying other airliners. It does have its challenging parts. It's very different in some areas, so you can start finding yourself looking for things. But also the landings, my goodness, they are going to take some work, and I can see how this airplane got its reputation. It's great to see that represented in the simulator, though. It's nice that the airplane does feel challenging to land, because that's what I was sort of hoping for when I got my hands on it. Thank you so much to TFDI Design for sending over this review copy of the aircraft, and I hope you've enjoyed this review. Lots more for me to learn as we take the airplane in the future. Like I say, I've never flown an MD-11, and I don't think I'll ever will, but yeah, it's what fun to recreate a bit of history in such an interesting machine in the simulator. There'll be plenty more videos, live streams, guides on plenty of aircraft on the channel, so do please subscribe if you'd like to see those. Otherwise, keep safe and well. We'll see you again soon. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.